She won't last 5 minutes in a real firefight, Petty Officer Kane whispered to his teammate as they watched Sergeant Vera Castellanos adjust her scope. The SEAL's voice carried just enough that she could hear every word while she checked her equipment. $20, says she freezes up the moment bullets start flying. His companion Rodriguez nodded with a smirk, already mentally spending his winnings. The mountain air was thin at this elevation, carrying the scent of pine and the metallic tang that always preceded combat operations. Castellanos had been attached to this SEAL reconnaissance team for the Afghanistan mission. Her marksmanship scores impressive enough on paper to earn the assignment. But paper and reality were different things entirely, and the SEALs made their skepticism clear through every sideways glance and mutter comment. Chief Warrant Officer Marcus Blackwood approached her position, his boots crunching on the rocky terrain. You understand, we're potentially looking at multiple hostiles at extreme range, Sergeant. His tone suggested he was offering her an exit strategy before things got serious. Most conventional forces aren't trained for engagements beyond 800 meters. We can radio for additional sniper support if you're not comfortable with the parameters. Before we continue with this mission, drop a comment and let us know what state you're watching from. Maybe you've witnessed similar acts of courage where you're from, whether in military families or first responders who prove themselves under pressure. Castellanos continued her equipment check without looking up. I'm comfortable with the parameters, Chief. Her voice remained steady as she spoke, though she could feel 17 pairs of eyes evaluating her every movement. The Barrett M82 felt familiar in her hands, its weight and balance as natural as breathing. She had requested this specific rifle for the mission, knowing its capabilities at extreme range. Kane leaned toward his spotter. Think she even knows what 2,000 meters looks like? The question hung in air as other team members gathered around the tactical display. Staff Sergeant Torres, the team's communications specialist, shook his head slowly while reviewing the mission brief. Engaging targets at that distance required more than just good scores at the range. It demanded experience under pressure, the ability to calculate wind speed, atmospheric conditions, and target movement while enemy rounds were incoming. The intelligence report had identified a high-value target compound nestled in a valley approximately 2,500 meters from their current overwatch position. Thermal imaging showed multiple heat signatures moving between buildings, suggesting a significant enemy presence. The mission parameters were clear: confirm hostile activity and eliminate any threats that posed immediate danger to coalition forces advancing through the area. Blackwood spread the tactical map across a flat boulder, gesturing for the team to gather around. Primary observation point is here, he said, tapping a ridge that overlooked the target area. We establish overwatch and assess the situation. If we confirm hostile activity, we eliminate threats and provide cover for the advancing units. He looked directly at Castellanos. You'll be primary marksman for any long-range engagements. The assignment should have been an honor, but the atmosphere around her felt anything but congratulatory. Rodriguez muttered something under his breath about hoping they had backup plans ready. Kane openly checked his own rifle, as if preparing to take over when she inevitably failed. Even Torres, who had been relatively neutral, now wore an expression of concern that suggested he was already planning alternative tactical approaches. Castellanos finished her pre-combat inspection and secured her gear. The familiar ritual of preparation helped calm her nerves, though she had learned long ago not to let emotions show in front of skeptical teammates. Her father had taught her to shoot when she was 12 years old on their ranch in New Mexico, where hitting targets at distance was a matter of necessity rather than sport. By 16, she could consistently hit prairie dogs at 600 meters with iron sights. But these men didn't know about those years of practice, the countless hours spent understanding wind patterns and bullet trajectory. They saw only what was in front of them: a female soldier attached to their elite unit, someone who didn't belong in their exclusive brotherhood of combat veterans. Their doubt was as tangible as the mountain air, expressed through every comment and gesture. Chief Blackwood began moving toward the observation point, signaling for the team to follow. Let's get into position and see what we're dealing with. His words carried the weight of command, but Castellanos could hear the underlying concern in his voice. This was a real mission with real consequences, not a training exercise where mistakes could be corrected and lessons learned safely. As they moved through the rocky terrain toward their overwatch position, Kane fell in a step beside Torres. "Ho Command knows what they're doing, attaching her to this operation," he said quietly. "The last thing we need is someone who can't deliver when it matters." His words were meant to be private, but sound carried differently at altitude, and Castellanos heard every syllable. The overwatch position offered a commanding view of the valley below, where morning shadows still clung to the eastern slopes despite the climbing sun. Castellanos settled into her firing position behind a natural rock formation, the Barrett's bipod legs finding stable purchase on the granite surface. Through her scope, the target compound appeared as a collection of mud brick buildings connected by worn pathways, deceptively peaceful in the early light. "Think the scopes even zeroed properly?" Rodriguez asked Torres while unpacking his spotting equipment. His voice carried that particular tone of professional concern that masked deeper skepticism. "Most conventional units don't have the resources for proper long-range calibration." Torres nodded as he set up his range-finding equipment, both men positioning themselves where they could observe Castellanos' performance. Chief Blackwood established the command position 20 meters to her right, his radio equipment crackling with periodic updates from advancing coalition forces. The tactical situation was developing rapidly. Intelligence indicated enemy fighters had been using the compound as a staging area for attacks on supply convoys, and recent intercepts suggested they were planning something significant for today. "She's probably never engaged a target beyond 500 meters in actual combat," Kane observed to his teammate Williams as they took defensive positions. Williams, a demolitions specialist with 3 deployments under his belt, checked his watch and shook his head. "Command's taking a hell of a risk, putting an untested shooter in the primary marksman role." The conversation continued in hushed tones, but every word reached Castellanos' ears with crystal clarity. The morning air was still, which would normally be ideal conditions for long-range shooting. But Castellanos knew that conditions could change rapidly in these mountains, with thermal currents and wind patterns shifting as the sun climbed higher. She began her systematic observation of the target area, noting potential wind indicators like dust movement and vegetation sway, building a mental map of the tactical environment. Through her scope, she could see movement within the compound. Figures moved between buildings with the purposeful stride of people conducting military operations rather than civilian activities. One man carried what appeared to be an AK-47, while another hefted a heavy pack that could contain explosives or ammunition. The distance made positive identification challenging, but their behavior patterns suggested hostile intent. Blackwood's radio crackled with an urgent transmission. "Overwatch, this is ground control. We have multiple contacts moving through your sector. Request immediate assessment and engagement authorization if threats are confirmed." The chief's voice became more formal as he responded. "Ground control, Overwatch. We have eyes on multiple military Ijmails with weapons at approximately 2,500 meters. Requesting permission to engage if they present immediate threat." Torres focused his spotting scope on the compound, calling out range and environmental readings. "Wind is negligible at this time, approximately 2 to 3 knots from the southwest. Temperature is rising, which will affect trajectory calculations. Atmospheric pressure is consistent with elevation." His professional assessment was thorough, but Castellanos could hear the underlying doubt in his voice, as if he was providing information she wouldn't know how to use effectively. Kane positioned himself where he could observe both the target area and Castellanos' performance. "If she misses the first shot, we're compromised and those hostiles will scatter before we get another opportunity," he told Williams quietly. "This isn't a training range where you get multiple attempts to adjust your scope. One shot, one opportunity, and if she blows it, the mission fails and coalition forces advance into a potential ambush." The figures in the compound were becoming more active, suggesting they might be preparing to move. Castellanos tracked one target through her scope, noting his movement patterns and trying to predict where he might go next. The man appeared to be carrying a radio, coordinating with others in the compound. Taking him out first would disrupt their communications and create confusion among the remaining hostiles. Permission granted to engage confirmed hostiles, came the radio response from ground control. Eliminate threats and provide overwatch for advancing units. Blackwood acknowledged the transmission and turned toward Castellanos. You have authorization to engage targets of opportunity, Sergeant. Prioritize communications, personnel, and heavy weapons operators. Rodriguez muttered something to Torres about hoping she didn't freeze up under pressure. The spotter continued providing environmental updates, but his tone suggested he was going through the motions rather than expecting effective use of the information. Most people crack the first time they have to take a life at that distance, Williams observed to Kane. It's one thing to hit paper targets, completely different when you're looking at a human being through a scope. Castellanos controlled her breathing and settled deeper into her shooting position. The familiar weight of the rifle felt reassuring against her shoulder, and she could hear her father's voice from years ago. Take your time, control your breathing, and trust your training. The target was still moving between buildings, but she was beginning to understand his pattern. He would emerge from the eastern building, cross the courtyard, and enter the western structure where other figures were gathered. The morning sun was climbing higher, and thermal currents would soon begin affecting bullet trajectory. Temperature differentials between the shadowed valleys and sunlit ridges created updrafts and crosswinds that could push a bullet several inches off target at extreme range. Castellanos began calculating the corrections needed for the changing conditions, factoring in elevation, humidity, and the gradual warming of the air between her position and the target. Your call, Sergeant, Blackwood said, his voice carrying the weight of command authority, but also a note of uncertainty. The coalition forces were depending on accurate reconnaissance and elimination of threats before they advanced through the valley. A missed shot or hesitation could compromise the entire operation and put friendly forces at risk. The target emerged from the eastern building exactly as Castellanos had predicted, radio in his left hand, assault rifle slung across his back. Through her scope, she could see him clearly now at 2,500 meters, his bearded face animated as he spoke into the communication device. He was coordinating something significant, his gestures urgent and purposeful. She's taking too long, Kane whispered to Williams, his voice tight with growing impatience. A real sniper would have taken that shot already. The target's going to disappear back into the building, and we'll lose the opportunity. Williams nodded grimly, checking his own weapon as if preparing to provide backup when Castellanos inevitably failed to deliver. Torres continued calling out environmental readings in a steady voice, though his tone suggested he was providing information that wouldn't be properly utilized. Wind has shifted to 4 knots from the west-southwest. Temperature differential between our position and target area is approximately 15 degrees. Humidity is dropping as the sun climbs. Each technical detail was professionally delivered, but the underlying skepticism was unmistakable. The radio operator in the compound paused in the courtyard, still speaking into his device. Castellanos could see other figures moving in response to whatever instructions he was giving. 2 men emerged from the western building carrying what appeared to be heavy weapons, while a third began setting up what looked like a mortar position. The compound was clearly preparing for combat operations against the advancing coalition forces. Chief Blackwood's radio crackled with another transmission from ground control. Overwatch, we need immediate assessment. Our forward elements are 15 minutes from your sector, and we need to know if the route is clear. Any delay in neutralizing threats could result in significant casualties when our people move through that valley. Blackwood looked toward Castellanos, his expression growing more concerned as seconds ticked by without action. The weight of command was visible in his posture, the responsibility for both his team and the advancing forces creating visible tension. Sergeant, we need a move on this target. Time is becoming a critical factor in this operation. Rodriguez shook his head as he observed through his spotting scope. At this range, with these environmental factors, you need someone with extensive experience in long-range precision shooting, he said to Torres. This isn't a job for someone who's only proven themselves on controlled firing ranges. Combat conditions change everything, especially when you're looking at actual human targets instead of paper silhouettes. The radio operator was moving again, heading toward the mortar position where his teammates were setting up their equipment. Castellanos tracked him through her scope, adjusting for the slight wind shift that Torres had called out. The Barrett felt solid and familiar against her shoulder, its precision engineering designed for exactly this type of engagement. She had fired thousands of rounds through similar weapons, understanding their capabilities and limitations intimately. Williams checked his watch again, the gesture visible to everyone in the Overwatch position. Coalition forces are going to be in the kill zone soon, and if those hostiles get their mortars set up, they'll have clear fields of fire on our people. The urgency in his voice reflected the tactical reality they were facing. Every minute of delay gave the enemy more time to prepare their positions and coordinate their attack. Kane positioned himself where he could clearly observe Castellanos' shooting position. When she misses, I can take the follow-up shot, he told Williams quietly. But by then we'll have lost the element of surprise, and those hostiles will go to ground. The mission parameters called for precise elimination of threats, not a prolonged firefight that would alert every enemy fighter in the valley. The target stopped near the mortar position, still coordinating on his radio while gesturing towards specific locations in the valley below. Castellanos could see him pointing toward the route that coalition forces would use, clearly planning an ambush. Taking him out would not only eliminate their communications coordination, but also disrupt their entire tactical plan. Torres made another environmental assessment, his professional training compelling him to provide accurate information despite his doubts about its effective use. Atmospheric conditions are optimal for the next 10 minutes, but thermal currents will begin affecting trajectory as ground temperature rises. The window for ideal shooting conditions is closing rapidly. Through her scope, Castellanos could see the radio operator's face clearly now, could observe his expressions as he spoke and gestured. He was young, probably mid-20s, with the intense focus of someone coordinating a military operation. Part of her training had involved understanding that targets were human beings, not just silhouettes, but the tactical necessity remained unchanged. He was directing an ambush that would kill coalition soldiers if allowed to proceed. Blackwood's patience was clearly wearing thin as he monitored radio traffic from advancing units. Sergeant Castellanos, we need action now. The tactical situation is developing rapidly, and we cannot afford further delays. His command voice carried both authority and growing concern about the consequences of inaction. Rodriguez continued his quiet commentary to Torres. Most people don't realize how much pressure affects your shooting at extreme range. Your heart rate, breathing, muscle tension, everything changes when you know lives depend on your accuracy. And that's assuming she can even calculate the trajectory corrections properly for these atmospheric conditions. The radio operator was moving again, this time toward a position that would give him a clear view of the valley approaches. Castellanos adjusted her aim point slightly, accounting for his movement and the environmental factors that Torres continued to call out. The morning sun was climbing higher, and she could feel the beginning of thermal currents that would soon make the shot more challenging. The radio operator had reached the elevated position, providing him optimal observation of the valley approaches where coalition forces would advance. Through her scope, Castellanos could see him raising binoculars to survey the terrain, his radio still active as he coordinated with the mortar team. The tactical picture was becoming clearer with each passing moment, and none of it favored the advancing friendly forces. She's going to choke, Kane stated flatly to Williams, no longer bothering to whisper. Look at her body language. Tensed up, overthinking everything. Real snipers work on instinct and training, not hesitation and second-guessing. Williams nodded as he watched Castellanos through his peripheral vision, noting the careful deliberation that Kane interpreted as uncertainty. Torres provided another environmental update, his voice maintaining professional neutrality despite growing concerns. Wind speed has increased to 6 knots, direction shifting between west and west-southwest. Temperature differential is becoming more pronounced as thermal heating begins. Optimal shooting conditions are degrading with each passing minute. Chief Blackwood monitored the radio traffic with increasing urgency. Ground control was reporting that forward elements had accelerated their advanced timeline due to intelligence about enemy movement in adjacent sectors. The window for clearing the route was shrinking rapidly, and any delay would force coalition forces to advance through a potentially compromised area without adequate overwatch protection. The mortar team had completed their setup, and Castellanos could see them loading rounds into the tube. The weapon was positioned to cover the exact route that coalition forces would use, creating a perfect kill zone for an ambush. The radio operator continued his coordination, occasionally pointing toward specific terrain features that would serve as reference points for the attack. Rodriguez focused his spotting scope on the compound, counting targets and assessing their equipment. We've got at least 6 hostiles with crew-serve weapons, plus the mortar team and radio operator. Even if she manages to hit the primary target, the rest of them will disperse and will have a running firefight with limited visibility of their positions. Kane checked his rifle again, ensuring it was ready for immediate use. When this goes sideways, we need to be prepared for rapid target engagement. Her hesitation is going to cost us the element of surprise, and then we're dealing with alerted hostiles who know our position. The tactical disadvantage was becoming more pronounced with each second of an action. Williams observed the compound through binoculars, noting additional movement between buildings. There are more hostiles than initial intelligence suggested. This isn't just a small group staging attacks on convoys. They've got enough personnel and equipment to seriously threaten our advancing forces, especially if they maintain communications coordination. The radio operator was now in position with clear lines of sight down the valley. Castellanos could see him speaking rapidly into his device, likely providing real-time updates about terrain features and approach routes. His intelligence would allow the ambush team to position themselves optimally for maximum effect against coalition forces. Blackwood's radio crackled with an urgent transmission. Overwatch, ground control. Forward elements report possible hostile observation of their movement. Request immediate confirmation of threat elimination. Time of contact is now 12 minutes and closing. The chief's response carried unmistakable stress as he acknowledged the transmission and looked toward Castellanos. Torres called out another wind reading, his professional training compelling him to provide accurate data despite his growing skepticism. Wind is now gusting to 8 knots, with significant variation in direction. These conditions are marginal for precision shooting at extreme range, especially for someone without extensive experience in atmospheric correction calculations. The tactical situation was deteriorating rapidly. Castellanos could see additional hostiles moving into concealed positions around the compound, suggesting they might have detected the Overwatch team's presence. The radio operator continued his coordination efforts, his animated gestures indicating he was directing a sophisticated defensive plan. Rodriguez shook his head as he observed the enemy activity. They're setting up interlocking fields of fire with multiple weapon systems. Even if she manages to eliminate the radio operator, they've probably already coordinated their positions and timing. Her delay has given them too much time to prepare their defenses. Kane's patience had completely evaporated as he watched the compound through his scope. This is exactly why conventional forces shouldn't be attached to special operations missions. They don't have the experience or instincts for high-pressure situations where split-second decisions determine mission success or failure. The morning sun was climbing higher, creating heat shimmer that would further complicate long-range shooting. Castellanos could see the atmospheric distortion beginning to affect visibility through her scope, adding another layer of complexity to an already challenging shot. The environmental conditions that had been optimal 20 minutes ago were now marginal at best. Williams checked his equipment again, preparing for the firefight that seemed increasingly inevitable. Once she misses or the hostiles detect our position, this becomes a completely different tactical situation. We'll be dealing with alerted enemies who know our location and have prepared defensive positions. The radio operator raised his binoculars again, scanning the approaches systematically. Through her scope, Castellanos could see his methodical observation pattern, noting how he focused on specific terrain features that would provide concealment for advancing forces. His intelligence gathering was professional and thorough, making him an even more critical target for elimination. Chief Blackwood monitored multiple radio frequencies, coordinating between his Overwatch team and the advancing coalition forces. The tactical picture was becoming more complex by the minute, with multiple moving parts that required precise timing and execution. Every second of delay increased the risk to friendly forces and reduced the likelihood of mission success. The heat shimmer was becoming more pronounced as thermal currents rose from the valley floor, creating visible distortion in the scope's field of view. Castellanos adjusted her position slightly, seeking the most stable shooting platform while calculating the increasingly complex atmospheric corrections needed for an accurate shot at 2,500 meters. The Barrett's familiar weight provided comfort, but she could feel the mounting pressure from her teammates' growing impatience. "This is painful to watch," Kane said to Williams, his voice carrying the frustration of a professional watching what he considered amateur performance. "She's overthinking every variable instead of trusting her training and taking the shot. By the time she finally pulls the trigger, if she ever does, the target will have moved to a covered position." Torres continued providing technical data with mechanical precision, though his tone suggested he was fulfilling a professional obligation rather than supporting effective action. Atmospheric pressure is stable, humidity at 32% and dropping. Wind speed varying between 6 and 9 knots with significant direction changes. These conditions require experienced judgment for trajectory compensation. The radio operator in the compound had completed his systematic observation of the valley approaches and was now coordinating final positioning with his team. Castellanos could see him gesturing toward specific locations where coalition forces would be most vulnerable, his tactical knowledge evident in the precision of his instructions. The mortar team adjusted their weapons elevation based on his guidance. Chief Blackwood received another transmission that increased the urgency exponentially. "Overwatch, ground control. Forward elements are now 10 minutes from your sector. We have additional intelligence suggesting multiple hostile teams are coordinating a complex ambush. Immediate threat elimination is critical for force protection." Rodriguez focused his spotting scope on the compound's defensive positions, counting weapon emplacements and estimating enemy strength. They've got at least 8 fighters with heavy weapons, plus the mortar crew and command element. Even perfect marksmanship won't eliminate all threats, but taking out their communications coordinator would disrupt their timing significantly. Williams observed Castellanos' shooting position with growing skepticism. Her breathing pattern is inconsistent. Muscle tension is visible in her shoulders, and she's making constant micro-adjustments that suggest uncertainty rather than confidence. Those are classic indicators of someone who's going to miss under pressure. The tactical situation was developing beyond the compound as well. Additional heat signatures had appeared on thermal imaging, suggesting enemy reinforcements were moving into supporting positions. The radio operator's coordination was clearly part of a larger plan involving multiple teams and sophisticated timing. Kane made no effort to hide his assessment of the situation. "She's going to miss, the hostiles will scatter, and we'll lose our primary opportunity to disrupt their ambush. Then our people advance into a kill zone with coordinated fires from multiple positions. Her hesitation is going to get coalition soldiers killed." Torres called out another environmental reading, his professional training compelling accuracy despite growing doubts about effective utilization. Temperature at target area is now 47 degrees Fahrenheit above our position. Mirage effect is visible through optical devices. Bullet trajectory will be affected by thermal stratification between firing position and target. The radio operator moved to a new vantage point that provided even better observation of the coalition approach routes. Through her scope, Castellanos could see him making detailed notes on what appeared to be a tactical map, marking specific reference points and timing sequences. His preparation was thorough and professional, making him an increasingly valuable target. Blackwood's stress was becoming more visible as he coordinated between multiple radio frequencies and monitored the tactical development. The mission parameters had been clear: eliminate threats before coalition forces entered the potential kill zone. Every minute of delay reduced the likelihood of successful force protection. Rodriguez shook his head as he continued observing the compound. They're not just setting up a simple ambush. This is a coordinated defense with multiple weapon systems and interlocking fields of fire. The radio operator is directing a sophisticated operation that could inflict significant casualties on our advancing forces. Williams checked his chronometer again, calculating time remaining before coalition forces would be committed to the approach route. Once our people start moving through that valley, they're exposed for at least 15 minutes before reaching covered positions. If those hostiles maintain communications and coordination, it's going to be a massacre. The morning sun continued climbing, and Castellanos could feel its warmth beginning to affect her equipment as well as atmospheric conditions. Metal components expanded slightly with temperature changes, potentially affecting zero and requiring additional compensation. The precision required for extreme-range shooting was becoming more challenging with each passing minute. Kane positioned himself for immediate action, his rifle ready and range cards prepared. When she fails, we'll have seconds to engage multiple targets before they disperse. The element of surprise will be lost, but we might be able to eliminate enough threats to provide some protection for our advancing forces. The radio operator was clearly the key to the enemy's coordination, his central role evident in how other fighters referenced his position and awaited his signals. Castellanos tracked him through her scope as he moved between observation points, noting his patterns and trying to predict his next position. His elimination would create confusion and disrupt the timing of their planned ambush. Torres provided another technical assessment, his voice maintaining professional neutrality despite personal doubts. Optimal engagement window is closing rapidly. Environmental conditions are degrading for precision shooting, and target movement patterns suggest imminent dispersal to defensive positions. The radio operator had positioned himself at the optimal observation point, his binoculars trained on the valley approach, where coalition forces would appear within minutes. Castellanos could see him speaking rapidly into his communication device, providing real-time intelligence updates that would allow the ambush teams to adjust their positioning for maximum effectiveness. Every second of his continued coordination increased the threat to advancing friendly forces. "She's frozen," Williams observed to Kane, watching Castellanos maintain her shooting position without action. Classic case of analysis paralysis. She's calculating and recalculating instead of trusting her initial assessment and engaging the target. Kane nodded grimly, his own rifle positioned for immediate use when her inevitable failure required backup action. Torres delivered another atmospheric reading with professional precision, though his tone suggested resignation about its practical application. Wind speed now gusting to 12 knots with significant variation. Thermal currents are creating vertical air movement that will affect bullet trajectory unpredictably. These conditions require extensive experience with atmospheric compensation techniques. Chief Blackwood monitored radio traffic that was becoming increasingly urgent as tactical timelines compressed. Ground control was reporting that forward elements had visual contact with the valley entrance and were requesting final clearance to proceed. The window for threat elimination was measured in minutes rather than the hours they had started with. The compound showed increased activity as additional hostiles moved into prepared positions. Castellanos could see fighters with RPGs taking concealment behind strategic cover points, while machine gun teams established interlocking fields of fire across the coalition approach route. The radio operator's coordination was clearly producing a sophisticated defensive plan. Rodriguez focused his spotting scope on the mortar position, noting the crew's state of readiness. They've got multiple rounds prepared, and the weapon is laid on target. Once they receive the fire command from that radio operator, they could put effective fire on our people within seconds. Her delay is giving them time to perfect their preparations. Kane's frustration had evolved into open criticism of the tactical decision to include Castellanos in the mission. This is exactly why special operations units maintain their own personnel for critical tasks. Conventional forces don't have the experience or psychological conditioning for high-stakes precision shooting under combat conditions. Williams checked his equipment again, preparing for the complex engagement that would be necessary if the primary shot failed. Multiple targets at varying ranges with different weapon systems and defensive positions. Even with perfect shooting from our entire team, some hostiles will survive to execute their ambush if we lose the element of surprise. The thermal distortion was becoming more pronounced, creating visible shimmer effects that complicated target identification through optical devices. Castellanos adjusted her scope settings to compensate for the changing atmospheric conditions, but she could feel the mounting pressure from her teammates' expectations and a tactical timeline that was rapidly approaching critical decision points. Torres called out wind variations with mechanical regularity, his professional training compelling accurate reporting despite personal doubts about effective utilization. Current reading shows 8 knots from the west-northwest, but gusting patterns indicate significant variation in both speed and direction. Precision shooting requires real-time adjustment for these fluctuations. The radio operator raised his binoculars again, scanning the valley approaches with systematic thoroughness. Through her scope, Castellanos could see his professional methodology, noting specific terrain features and measuring distances with practiced efficiency. His intelligence gathering was providing the enemy with detailed information about optimal engagement zones. Blackwood received another transmission that added urgency to an already critical situation. Overwatch, ground control. Forward elements report possible hostile observation of their movement. Request immediate confirmation that Overwatch has eliminated communications threats. Time to contact is now 8 minutes, and we need clearance to proceed. Rodriguez shook his head as he observed the increasing enemy activity. They're not just setting up a hasty ambush anymore. This has become a prepared defense with multiple backup plans and alternate positions. That radio operator is directing a textbook engagement that could destroy our entire forward element. Kane positioned himself where he could engage multiple targets in rapid succession, his tactical planning assuming Castellanos would fail to eliminate the primary threat. When she misses or freezes completely, we'll have maybe 30 seconds before they go to ground, and we lose visual contact. The entire tactical advantage will be lost because of her inability to perform under pressure. The morning sun continued its climb, and heat shimmer was now visible even without optical magnification. Castellanos could feel sweat beginning to form despite the mountain air's coolness, a physiological response to the mounting pressure and her teammates' increasingly vocal skepticism. The Barrett remained steady against her shoulder, but the atmospheric conditions were degrading rapidly. Williams observed the compound through binoculars, counting weapon positions and assessing defensive preparations. Even if she manages to hit the radio operator, they've had enough time to establish backup communications and predetermined firing sequences. Her hesitation has allowed them to create redundancy in their command structure. The radio operator was now coordinating final preparations, his gestures indicating imminent execution of the ambush plan. Castellanos could see him pointing towards specific timing markers and reference points, ensuring all elements understood their roles in the coordinated attack. His elimination remained critical for disrupting enemy coordination, but the window for action was closing rapidly. Torres provided another environmental assessment, his voice carrying the resignation of a professional watching optimal conditions deteriorate. Atmospheric stability is decreasing as thermal heating intensifies. Precision shooting at extreme range becomes exponentially more difficult as environmental variables increase beyond predictable parameters. The radio operator had completed his final coordination sequence and was now directing the mortar team's precise targeting adjustments. Through her scope, Castellanos could see him pointing towards specific reference points in the valley, his professional gestures indicating exact firing solutions for maximum effect against approaching coalition forces. The sophisticated nature of his tactical planning was becoming more evident with each passing moment. "This is becoming a disaster," Kane stated flatly to Williams, no longer concerned about maintaining operational security through whispered communications. "She's had multiple opportunities to engage and has failed to act on any of them. Now we're watching the enemy complete their preparations while our people advance into a kill zone." Torres continued providing atmospheric data with mechanical precision, though his tone reflected growing resignation about its practical application. Wind direction has shifted to west-northwest at 14 knots with significant gusting. Thermal stratification is creating unpredictable air currents. These conditions are beyond the capabilities of most long-range shooters, especially under combat stress. Chief Blackwood monitored increasingly urgent radio traffic as tactical timelines reached critical thresholds. Ground control was reporting that forward elements had committed to the approach route and were now exposed in terrain that offered limited cover if the ambush proceeded as planned. The mission had reached the point where delayed action was equivalent to mission failure. The compound's defensive preparations were nearly complete, with weapon teams in position and ammunition distributed according to the radio operator's coordination. Castellanos could see fighters checking their equipment and adjusting positions based on his continued guidance. His central role in their tactical success was undeniable, making his elimination even more critical. Rodriguez focused his spotting scope on the valley approaches, noting the exposed terrain that coalition forces would traverse. Once our people enter that open ground, they're committed for at least 12 minutes before reaching any significant cover. If those hostiles maintain coordination and timing, it's going to be a slaughter. Williams checked his chronometer again, calculating the rapidly decreasing time available for effective intervention. Coalition forces are now 6 minutes from entering the kill zone. Even if she takes the shot now, the hostiles have had enough time to establish backup communications and contingency plans. Her hesitation has compromised the entire operation. The thermal distortion was now severe enough to affect target identification even with high-quality optics. Castellanos could see the shimmer effects creating apparent movement in her scope's field of view, adding another layer of complexity to an already challenging engagement. The atmospheric conditions that had been marginal 20 minutes ago were now approaching the limits of effective precision shooting. Kane positioned his rifle for immediate action, his tactical assessment assuming complete failure of the primary engagement plan. When she either misses or fails to shoot entirely, we'll have to engage multiple targets simultaneously with degraded atmospheric conditions and alerted hostiles. The tactical disadvantage will be almost insurmountable. The radio operator raised his communication device again, speaking rapidly in what appeared to be final coordination before execution. Through her scope, Castellanos could see his animated expressions and urgent gestures, clearly conveying time-critical information to dispersed elements. His professional competence was evident in the systematic nature of his coordination efforts. Torres called out another wind reading, his professional training compelling accurate reporting despite personal skepticism about effective utilization. Current wind speed varying between 12 and 16 knots with direction shifts of up to 30 degrees. Bullet trajectory calculations require real-time adjustment for these fluctuating conditions, plus compensation for thermal effects. Blackwood received a transmission that eliminated any remaining flexibility in the tactical timeline. Overwatch ground control. Forward elements are now committed to the approach route. We need immediate confirmation of threat elimination, or we're proceeding with the assumption of hostile contact. Request immediate status report on Overwatch engagement. Rodriguez shook his head as he observed the enemy's state of readiness. They're prepared for immediate execution of a coordinated ambush with multiple weapon systems and predetermined firing sequences. That radio operator has created a tactical situation that could result in significant coalition casualties, and we've lost our opportunity to prevent it. Williams observed Castellanos' continued hesitation with growing frustration. She's overthinking every variable instead of recognizing that perfect conditions don't exist in combat. Real snipers work with available conditions and trust their training rather than waiting for ideal circumstances that never come. The morning sun had climbed high enough to create significant thermal effects throughout the valley, with heat shimmer visible across multiple elevation bands. Castellanos could feel the atmospheric instability affecting her scope's clarity, making precise target identification more challenging. The environmental factors were now working against successful engagement at extreme range. Kane's assessment had become openly critical of both Castellanos' performance and the tactical decision to include her in the mission. This is what happens when political considerations override operational requirements. Special operations units exist specifically because conventional forces lack the training and psychological conditioning for high-stakes precision missions under combat stress. The radio operator completed another coordination sequence and gestured toward the mortar position, apparently confirming final firing solutions. Castellanos could see the weapon crew making final adjustments based on his guidance, their preparations indicating imminent readiness for coordinated fires against approaching coalition forces. Torres provided what might be his final atmospheric assessment before the tactical situation rendered precision shooting impossible. Environmental conditions are now marginal for extreme-range precision shooting. Thermal currents, wind variation, and atmospheric distortion have created variables that require extensive experience with environmental compensation techniques to overcome successfully. The radio operator had positioned himself for final observation of the coalition approach route, his binoculars trained on the exact point where friendly forces would emerge from cover into the prepared kill zone. Castellanos could see him speaking into his communication device with the urgent precision of someone coordinating imminent action. The mortar crew had completed their preparations and was awaiting his fire command. "She's completely frozen," Kane announced to the entire team, abandoning any pretense of maintaining quiet communications. "Look at her. She's been in position for over 30 minutes and hasn't fired a single shot." This is exactly why conventional forces shouldn't be attached to critical special operations missions. Williams checked his equipment one final time, preparing for the complex engagement that will be necessary when Castellanos failed to eliminate the primary threat. Multiple hostiles with crew-served weapons prepared defensive positions and coordinated fires. Even with perfect shooting from our entire team, significant enemy elements will survive to execute their ambush. Torres delivered atmospheric readings with the mechanical precision of a professional, fulfilling his duty despite personal conviction that the information would not be effectively utilized. Wind speed now sustained at 16 knots with gusts to 20. Direction varying between northwest and west-northwest. Thermal distortion is severe enough to affect target identification through optical devices. Chief Blackwood received the transmission that eliminated all remaining tactical flexibility. Overwatch, ground control. Forward elements are now entering the valley approach. We have visual contact with the objective area and are proceeding on schedule. Request confirmation that Overwatch has neutralized communications threats, or we adjust our route accordingly. The compound showed final preparations for coordinated engagement, with weapon teams in optimal positions and ammunition prepared according to the radio operator's detailed planning. Castellanos could see fighters making last-minute adjustments based on his continued guidance, their professional efficiency indicating extensive training and experience in ambush operations. Rodriguez observed the tactical development through his spotting scope, his assessment grimly realistic about the consequences of continued inaction. Coalition forces are now committed to terrain that offers no alternate routes and minimal cover. If that radio operator maintains coordination with his teams, they'll be able to deliver accurate fires from multiple positions simultaneously. Kane positioned himself for immediate engagement of multiple targets, his tactical planning assuming complete failure of the primary mission. When she fails to act, we'll have approximately 15 seconds before alerted hostiles disperse to covered positions. The element of surprise will be lost, and we'll be dealing with a prepared enemy who knows our location. The thermal shimmer had become severe enough to create apparent target movement, even when the radio operator was stationary. Castellanos could see the atmospheric distortion affecting her scope's clarity, making precise aim point selection more challenging. The environmental conditions were now beyond optimal parameters for extreme-range precision shooting. Williams observed Castellanos with growing frustration that had evolved into open criticism. She's had multiple clear shots at a stationary target and has failed to engage on any of them. This isn't hesitation anymore, it's paralysis. Her inability to perform under pressure is going to result in coalition casualties. The radio operator raised his binoculars again, scanning the approach route with systematic thoroughness. Through her scope, Castellanos could see his professional methodology as he identified specific reference points and confirmed timing sequences with his dispersed teams. His tactical competence was evident in every gesture and communication. Torres called out wind variations that had reached the limits of predictable atmospheric conditions. Current readings show sustained winds above acceptable parameters for precision shooting at extreme range. Gusting patterns are creating unpredictable air currents that would challenge even experienced long-range specialists working under ideal conditions. Blackwood monitored radio traffic that was becoming increasingly urgent as coalition forces advanced deeper into the potential kill zone. The tactical timeline had reached the point where immediate action was required to prevent significant friendly casualties. Every second of continued delay increased the likelihood of successful enemy ambush. Rodriguez focused his spotting scope on the mortar position, noting the crew's readiness for immediate action. They've completed all firing preparations and are awaiting the execute command from their coordinator. Once he gives the signal, they can place accurate fire on our advancing forces within seconds of the initial engagement. Kane's assessment had become a direct indictment of both Castellanos' performance and the decision-making process that had placed her in this critical position. This is what happens when mission requirements are subordinated to political considerations. Special operations exist because conventional forces lack the psychological conditioning for high-pressure situations where lives depend on immediate decisive action. The morning sun continued climbing, and atmospheric heating was creating thermal currents that affected bullet trajectory in unpredictable ways. Castellanos could feel the mounting pressure from her teammates' criticism and the tactical reality that coalition forces were now exposed in terrain that offered limited protection if the ambush proceeded as planned. Williams checked his chronometer, calculating the rapidly decreasing time available for any effective intervention. Coalition forces are now 4 minutes from entering optimal engagement range for the enemy's prepared positions. Even immediate action at this point may not prevent significant casualties given the sophistication of their defensive preparations. The radio operator completed another coordination sequence, his gestures indicating final confirmation of firing solutions and timing sequences. Castellanos could see him pointing toward specific terrain features while speaking rapidly into his communication device, clearly providing last-minute adjustments to ensure maximum effectiveness of the coordinated ambush. Torres provided what appeared to be his final atmospheric assessment before environmental conditions rendered precision shooting at extreme range effectively impossible. Current atmospheric instability has created variables that exceed normal compensation techniques. Thermal effects, wind variation, and optical distortion have combined to create marginal conditions for even the most experienced precision shooters. The radio operator had reached the critical moment, raising his communication device for what appeared to be the final coordination before execution. Through her scope, Castellanos could see his mouth moving rapidly as he spoke, his gestures urgent and precise as he provided last-second timing adjustments to the dispersed ambush teams. The mortar crew was poised with their weapon, waiting for his execute command. "This is it," Kin announced grimly to the entire Overwatch team. "She's going to let our people walk into a prepared kill zone, because she can't pull the trigger when it matters. This is the exact scenario that gets soldiers killed and missions failed." His voice carried the weight of professional conviction about the consequences of her continued inaction. Williams positioned his rifle for immediate engagement of multiple targets, his tactical assessment assuming total failure of the primary mission objective. "When those hostiles open fire on our advancing forces, we'll have to engage from a compromised position with alerted enemies who know our location. The tactical advantage we could have had is completely lost." Torres delivered what would likely be his final atmospheric reading before the situation developed beyond the possibility of precision shooting. Wind speed now exceeding 20 knots with severe gusting patterns. Thermal distortion is creating optical effects that make precise target identification extremely difficult. These conditions are beyond acceptable parameters for extreme-range precision engagement. Chief Blackwood received the transmission that marked the point of no return for coalition forces advancing through the valley. "Overwatch, ground control. Forward elements are now 2 minutes from entering primary engagement range. We need immediate confirmation of threat neutralization, or we're proceeding with the assumption of hostile contact and adjusting tactics accordingly." The compound's defensive preparations had reached final readiness, with all weapon systems positioned and coordinated according to the radio operator's detailed planning. Castellanos could see fighters making final equipment checks and confirming their assigned sectors of fire. The sophistication of their preparation indicated extensive training and experience in coordinated ambush operations. Rodriguez observed the tactical development with the resignation of a professional watching an inevitable disaster unfold. Coalition forces are now committed to terrain that offers no viable alternate routes and minimal cover. That radio operator has created a textbook ambush scenario that could result in significant friendly casualties if his coordination remains intact. Kane's frustration had evolved into open anger directed at both Castellanos and the command decisions that had placed her in this critical position. She's had over 30 minutes to engage a stationary target under initially optimal conditions and has failed to act. Her paralysis is going to get good soldiers killed because she doesn't have the psychological conditioning for combat operations. The thermal shimmer was now so severe that it created constant apparent movement throughout the scope's field of view, making precise aim point selection extremely challenging. Castellanos could feel the atmospheric distortion affecting her ability to maintain consistent target picture, adding another layer of complexity to an already difficult engagement scenario. Williams checked his chronometer again, his calculations showing that the window for effective intervention had essentially closed. Even if she takes the shot right now, the hostiles have had enough time to establish backup communications and contingency plans. Her delay has allowed them to create redundancy in their command structure that will survive single-point failures. The radio operator was now speaking continuously into his communication device, providing real-time updates about coalition force movement to his dispersed teams. Through her scope, Castellanos could see his animated expressions and urgent gestures as he coordinated final timing adjustments based on actual observation of the approaching friendly forces. Torres called out atmospheric conditions that had deteriorated beyond the capabilities of most precision shooting systems. Current environmental variables include sustained high winds, severe thermal distortion, and atmospheric instability that would challenge even specialized long-range weapon systems operated by experienced personnel under controlled conditions. Blackwood monitored radio traffic that was becoming increasingly desperate as tactical timelines reached critical thresholds. Ground control was requesting immediate status updates about threat elimination, while simultaneously preparing contingency plans for advancing forces who might encounter coordinated resistance from prepared defensive positions. Rodriguez focused his spotting scope on the enemy mortar position, noting the crew's complete readiness for immediate action upon receiving the fire command. They've calculated precise firing solutions for the coalition approach route, and can deliver accurate fires within seconds of receiving the execute order from their coordinator. Kane positioned himself where he could observe both the compound and Castellanos' shooting position. His tactical planning focused entirely on damage control after her anticipated failure. When this goes wrong, we'll need to engage multiple targets simultaneously while coalition forces are under fire. The tactical situation will be chaos, and we'll be fighting from a disadvantaged position. The morning sun had climbed high enough to create maximum thermal effects throughout the engagement area, with heat shimmer visible across multiple elevation bands and atmospheric layers. Castellanos could feel the environmental conditions working against successful precision shooting, making the already challenging shot exponentially more difficult. Williams observed the increasing enemy activity with growing concern about the tactical consequences of continued inaction. They're not just prepared for a simple ambush anymore. This has become a sophisticated defensive operation with multiple weapon systems, coordinated fires, and predetermined contingency plans. Her hesitation has given them time to create a nearly perfect tactical scenario. The radio operator raised his binoculars for final visual confirmation of coalition force positions, his systematic observation indicating imminent execution of the coordinated ambush plan. Castellanos could see him speaking rapidly while pointing toward specific terrain features, clearly providing precise, targeting information to ensure maximum effectiveness of the planned engagement. The radio operator lifted the communication device to his mouth for the final transmission that would trigger the coordinated ambush. Castellanos could see him through her scope, his finger poised on the transmit button, his eyes fixed on the valley approach where coalition forces would emerge into the kill zone within 90 seconds. The mortar crew waited with their weapon trained on predetermined coordinates. "She's going to watch our people die," Kane stated with bitter finality, his voice carrying the weight of professional judgment about mission failure. 35 minutes in position, and she hasn't fired a single shot. This is exactly why special operations units don't rely on conventional forces for critical precision tasks. Castellanos felt the familiar calm that had always preceded her most difficult shots, the same stillness that had settled over her during countless hours on the New Mexico ranch where her father had taught her that distance was just another variable to calculate and overcome. The Barrett felt solid against her shoulder, its precision engineering designed for exactly this moment. The wind reading from Torres showed sustained velocity at 22 knots with gusting patterns. But Castellanos had learned to read atmospheric conditions through years of practice in challenging environments. She could see the thermal currents through her scope, could feel the rhythm of the gusting pattern, could calculate the precise moment when conditions would align for the shot. Williams positioned his rifle for immediate backup engagement. His tactical assessment focused on damage control after the anticipated primary mission failure. Multiple targets at varying ranges with different weapon systems. Even perfect shooting from our entire team won't eliminate all threats once they're alerted to our position. Through her scope, Castellanos could see the radio operator's thumb moving toward the transmit button, his mouth opening to speak the words that would initiate the ambush. She had calculated every variable: wind speed and direction, thermal effects on bullet trajectory, atmospheric pressure, humidity, temperature differential between her position and the target area 2,500 meters away. The Barrett's trigger had a clean break at exactly 4 pounds of pressure, and Castellanos had fired thousands of rounds through similar weapons, understanding their capabilities and limitations with intimate precision. Her breathing slowed to the controlled rhythm that her father had taught her, the natural respiratory pause that provided the stable platform necessary for extreme-range precision shooting. Torres called out another wind reading that confirmed the atmospheric conditions she had been monitoring through her scope. Current wind speed varying between 18 and 24 knots, direction northwest with occasional shifts. Thermal distortion severe, but predictable based on current heating patterns. Kane shook his head as he watched Castellanos maintain her shooting position without action. She's overthinking every variable instead of recognizing that perfect conditions don't exist in combat. Real precision shooters work with available conditions and trust their training rather than waiting for ideal circumstances. The radio operator's finger was now touching the transmit button, his eyes focused on the valley approach, where coalition forces were advancing toward the prepared kill zone. Castellanos could see his professional concentration, could observe the precise timing of his coordination as he prepared to execute a sophisticated ambush that would inflict significant casualties on friendly forces. Chief Blackwood received a transmission that marked the final moments before coalition forces would be exposed in optimal engagement range for the enemy's prepared positions. Overwatch Ground Control. Forward elements are now 60 seconds from entering primary engagement zone. Request immediate confirmation of threat status. Rodriguez focused his spotting scope on the compound's defensive positions, noting the complete readiness of multiple weapon systems coordinated according to the radio operator's detailed planning. Machine gun teams with interlocking fields of fire, RPG operators positioned for anti-armor engagement, and a mortar crew prepared for immediate indirect fire support. Castellanos calculated the precise compensation needed for the environmental conditions: elevation adjustment for the downward angle, windage correction for the gusting crosswind, additional elevation to account for the thermal effects that would push the bullet higher as it traveled through the heated air layers between her position and the target. Williams checked his chronometer, his calculations showing that coalition forces were now committed to terrain that offered no viable alternate routes. Once our people enter that valley, they're exposed for 12 minutes before reaching any significant cover. If those hostiles maintain coordination, it's going to be devastating. The radio operator raised the communication device closer to his mouth, his posture indicating imminent transmission of the execute command. Through her scope, Castellanos could see his finger position on the transmit button, could observe his mouth beginning to form the words that would trigger the coordinated ambush of advancing coalition forces. Kane positioned himself for immediate engagement of multiple targets, his tactical planning assuming complete failure of the primary shot. When she freezes or misses, we'll have approximately 10 seconds before alerted hostiles disperse to cover positions. The element of surprise will be completely lost. Castellanos felt her heartbeat slow to the controlled rhythm that had always preceded her most challenging shots. The scope's crosshairs settled on the radio operator's center mass, the reticle steady despite the thermal shimmer and atmospheric distortion. Her finger found the trigger's precise breakpoint, for pounds of pressure applied with a smooth consistency that years of practice had made automatic. Torres provided his final atmospheric reading before the tactical situation would render precision shooting irrelevant. Environmental conditions are at the limits of effective compensation techniques. Wind variation, thermal effects, and optical distortion require immediate action if engagement is to be attempted. The Barrett's report echoed across the mountainside like thunder, the .50 caliber round cutting through 2,500 meters of turbulent air with mathematical precision. Castellanos felt the familiar recoil against her shoulder as the weapon cycled, ejecting the spent brass in a perfect arc that caught the morning sunlight before clattering against the rocks behind her position. Through her scope, she watched the radio operator crumple instantly, the communication device spinning away from his lifeless fingers to shatter against the compound's stone wall. The execute command that would have triggered the coordinated ambush died with him, leaving the dispersed enemy teams without coordination or timing for their sophisticated attack plan. The silence that followed the shot's echo was absolute. Kane's mouth hung open as he stared through his own scope at the compound, his rifle forgotten in his hands. The radio operator who had been speaking into his communication device 1 second before now lay motionless in the dirt, eliminated by a shot that had seemed impossible under the prevailing atmospheric conditions. Williams lowered his binoculars slowly, his eyes moving between the compound and Castellanos' shooting position with an expression of complete disbelief. 2,500 meters, in gusting winds above 20 knots, with severe thermal distortion. The mathematical precision required for that engagement exceeded anything he had witnessed in 3 combat deployments. Torres sat frozen behind his spotting scope, his professional training compelling him to call out the results even as his mind struggled to process what he had observed. Hit! Center mass. Target down. His voice cracked slightly on the last words. The technical assessment delivered with mechanical precision, while his assumptions about conventional force capabilities underwent complete revision. Chief Blackwood grabbed his radio with hands that trembled almost imperceptibly. Ground control, Overwatch. Primary communications, threat eliminated. Hostile coordination disrupted. Advance route is clear for friendly force movement. His command voice remained steady, but his eyes stayed fixed on Castellanos with an expression that mixed professional respect with profound surprise. The compound erupted into confusion as enemy fighters realized their coordinator was down and their sophisticated ambush plan had collapsed. Castellanos worked the Barrett's bolt action smoothly, chambering another round while tracking secondary targets through her scope. The mortar crew was abandoning their weapon, their predetermined firing solutions now useless without timing coordination from their eliminated leader. Rodriguez focused his spotting scope on the compound's defensive positions, watching the tactical situation deteriorate from the enemy's perspective. They're breaking contact and dispersing to alternate positions. Without their radio operator, they've lost coordination and can't execute their planned engagement. The ambush is completely disrupted. Kane slowly turned toward Castellanos, his professional assessment of her capabilities undergoing complete recalibration. The shot he had just witnessed represented precision marksmanship that exceeded the performance of most specialized long-range shooters, accomplished under environmental conditions that would challenge even elite snipers with extensive combat experience. Williams checked his chronometer, calculating the timing of the engagement relative to coalition force movement. She eliminated the primary threat with less than 40 seconds to spare before our people entered optimal engagement range for the enemy's prepared positions. The margin for error was minimal, and the execution was flawless. Through her scope, Castellanos tracked another target, a fighter with an RPG who was attempting to establish a new firing position. The second shot came 30 seconds after the first, the Barrett's precision engineering delivering another .50 caliber round across the valley with devastating accuracy. The hostile spun and dropped, his weapon clattering uselessly down the rocky slope. Torres called out environmental readings with renewed respect for their practical application. Wind speed sustained at 20 knots, direction northwest. Thermal effects significant but predictable. Range to secondary target 2,400 meters. His technical assessments now carried the weight of supporting genuinely effective precision shooting rather than futile attempts at impossible engagements. The remaining enemy fighters were now in full retreat, their coordinated defensive plan shattered by the elimination of their key personnel. Castellanos continued tracking targets through her scope, her movements economical and professional as she identified and engaged threats according to their priority for coalition force protection. Blackwood monitored radio traffic that had shifted from urgent concern about advancing into prepared ambush positions to coordination for pursuing retreating hostile elements. The tactical situation had reversed completely, with enemy forces now seeking escape routes rather than executing sophisticated attack plans against exposed coalition forces. Kane watched Castellanos work with growing understanding of her actual capabilities. Each shot was delivered with the same mechanical precision, the same controlled breathing, the same smooth follow-through that characterized elite precision shooting. Her performance under extreme pressure revealed training and experience that exceeded his initial assessment by several orders of magnitude. Williams observed the compound through binoculars, counting eliminated threats and assessing the tactical impact of Castellanos' intervention. 3 confirmed kills at ranges exceeding 2,400 meters, all delivered under marginal atmospheric conditions with precision that prevented coalition casualties and mission compromise. The statistical probability of such performance was extraordinarily low. Rodriguez continued spotting for additional targets, his professional tone now reflecting genuine cooperation rather than skeptical compliance with procedural requirements. Multiple hostiles in retreat toward the eastern ridgeline. Range approximately 2,800 meters. Wind conditions remained challenging, but manageable for precision engagement. Castellanos chambered another round and tracked the retreating fighters through her scope, calculating lead angles and trajectory adjustments for moving targets at extended range. The Barrett felt familiar and responsive in her hands, its precision capabilities matching her training and experience with weapons designed for extreme-range precision shooting under combat conditions. Torres provided range and environmental data with the efficiency of a professional supporting effective precision shooting operations. Primary retreat route is through the eastern saddle, range varying between 26 and 3,000 meters. Atmospheric conditions remain stable enough for continued precision engagement if targets present themselves. The last hostile fighter disappeared behind the eastern ridgeline, eliminating any remaining threats to coalition forces advancing through the valley below. Castellanos engaged the Barrett safety and began her post-engagement equipment check. Her movements methodical and professional as she secured the weapon system that had just delivered decisive tactical results under extreme conditions. Kane approached her position slowly, his earlier skepticism replaced by genuine professional respect that was visible in every gesture. "Sergeant, I owe you an apology. What I witnessed today was precision marksmanship that exceeds anything I've seen in 8 years of special operations. Your performance under pressure was absolutely exceptional." Williams lowered his binoculars and turned toward Castellanos with an expression that mixed admiration with professional reassessment of her capabilities. "For confirmed kills at ranges exceeding 2,400 meters, delivered under marginal atmospheric conditions with timing that prevented coalition casualties. That level of precision shooting is world-class by any standard." Torres completed his final spotting assessment and moved toward Castellanos' position. His earlier professional skepticism transformed into genuine respect for demonstrated competence. "Your environmental compensation techniques were textbook perfect. I've worked with specialized long-range units, and your performance today ranks among the finest precision shooting I've observed under combat conditions." Chief Blackwood received the final transmission from ground control that confirmed the tactical success of the Overwatch mission. "Overwatch, ground control. Forward elements report clear passage through the valley with no hostile contact. Your precision engagement eliminated all identified threats and enabled mission success. Outstanding performance by the entire Overwatch team." Rodriguez focused his spotting scope on the compound one final time, confirming that no hostile activity remained in the area. All enemy positions are abandoned, with confirmed elimination of key personnel and disruption of coordinated defensive plans. The precision timing of the engagement prevented what would have been significant coalition casualties. Castellanos completed her equipment check and began breaking down her firing position, her movements efficient and professional as she prepared for movement to the extraction point. The Barrett was carefully cleaned and secured, its precision components protected for future operations that might require similar extreme-range capabilities. Kane extended his hand toward Castellanos in a gesture that carried genuine professional respect. "I made assumptions about your capabilities that were completely wrong. Your performance today demonstrated precision marksmanship skills that rank among the finest I've encountered in special operations. You earned the respect of this entire team." Williams approached with his own expression of professional acknowledgement. "The shot sequence you delivered today will be discussed in tactical analysis for years. Eliminating multiple targets at those ranges under those conditions represents precision shooting that exceeds standard training curricula by significant margins." Torres gathered his spotting equipment while continuing his assessment of Castellanos' demonstrated capabilities. "Your understanding of atmospheric compensation techniques and environmental factors was absolutely professional. Working with you today reminded me why precision shooting is considered both science and art at the highest levels." If you enjoyed this story about proving capability under extreme pressure, please drop a comment and let us know your favorite moment, or tell us about someone you know who showed hidden strength when others doubted them. Maybe you've witnessed similar courage in military families or first responders in your community. Chief Blackwood coordinated the team's movement toward the extraction point while monitoring radio traffic about the successful completion of coalition force objectives in the valley below. The tactical situation had developed exactly as planned once the Overwatch team eliminated the primary threats to advancing friendly forces. Rodriguez completed his equipment breakdown and moved toward Castellanos with an expression that reflected complete revision of his initial assessment. Your shooting today was absolutely exceptional. The precision required for those engagements under combat stress exceeds what most people could accomplish under controlled range conditions. Kane gathered his gear while continuing to process the demonstration of capability he had witnessed. I spent 30 minutes questioning your qualifications for this mission, and you spent 30 minutes proving that your precision shooting skills exceed those of most specialized snipers I've worked with in elite units. Williams checked his chronometer and calculated the tactical timeline that had been preserved by Castellanos' precise intervention. Coalition forces advanced through the valley on schedule with 0 casualties because your precision engagement eliminated all coordinated threats. The mission succeeded because of your exceptional performance under pressure. Torres approached Castellanos with the professional respect that characterized acknowledgement between competent specialists. Your demonstration of precision marksmanship today was absolutely world-class. Working with someone of your caliber reminded me why extreme-range shooting is considered one of the most demanding skills in military operations. The team moved toward the extraction point as a cohesive unit, the earlier skepticism and doubt replaced by mutual professional respect earned through demonstrated competence under extreme pressure. Castellanos had proven her capabilities through performance that exceeded the expectations of elite special operations personnel. Blackwood coordinated final radio communications while the team prepared for helicopter extraction from the mountainous terrain. The mission had achieved all primary objectives with 0 friendly casualties, largely due to the precision, timing, and accuracy of the Overwatch team's engagement of hostile threats. Kane walked alongside Castellanos during the movement to the landing zone, his earlier criticism replaced by genuine admiration for demonstrated precision shooting capabilities. Today's performance ranks among the finest examples of combat marksmanship I've witnessed. You've earned the respect of everyone on this team through exceptional professional competence. Rodriguez completed final equipment checks while reflecting on the tactical demonstration he had observed. 4 precision shots at extreme range under challenging conditions, each delivered with timing and accuracy that prevented coalition casualties. That level of performance represents the highest standards of military precision shooting. The helicopter extraction proceeded smoothly, with all team members returning safely from a mission that had achieved complete tactical success through the professional competence of personnel who had proven their capabilities under the most demanding combat conditions.